I stared at my phone screen, reading the message for the third time, trying to make sense of words that felt like a slap across my face. The blue light illuminated my living room in Beacon Hill, where I sat alone on Christmas Eve, surrounded by the silence of a house that used to echo with laughter. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. I miss you every single day. Love, Mom." That's all I had written. 12 words. 12 words to my only daughter after 18 months of complete silence. 18 months of blocked numbers, returned letters, and a grandmother-shaped hole in what should have been my golden years. The response came 15 minutes later. My heart leapt when I saw Isabel's name on the notification. Finally, she was ready to talk. But when I opened the message, the words weren't hers. "Stop bothering her. She doesn't want to talk to you. Accept it. Dylan." My son-in-law had responded from my daughter's phone. 9 words that landed like punches, each one calculated to hurt. I read them again and again, searching for any possibility that I had misunderstood. But there was no misunderstanding the cruelty in those exclamation points, no softening the command to accept it. I set the phone down on the coffee table, my hand shaking. At 57 years old, I had built a financial consulting empire from nothing. I had negotiated with Fortune 500 CEOs who would have eaten most people alive. I had survived a public divorce that left me humiliated but determined. I had transformed pain into purpose, weakness into wealth. But sitting there on Christmas Eve, holding a phone that contained my son-in-law's contempt, I felt something inside me crack. The tears came before I could stop them. Hot, angry, desperate tears that I hadn't allowed myself to cry in months. I pulled the cashmere throw blanket around my shoulders, even though the house was perfectly heated to 72 degrees. The cold I felt came from somewhere deeper. My eyes drifted to the mantel, where a photograph of Isabel at 5 years old sat in a silver frame. She was wearing the red velvet dress I had stayed up until 3 in the morning sewing for her Christmas pageant. Her blonde hair was in 2 perfect braids, and her smile showed the gap where she had lost her first tooth. That little girl had looked at me like I hung the moon. The 32-year-old woman she had become couldn't even send her own rejection. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through our message history. The last real conversation we had was from May of last year, before the dinner, before everything fell apart. Before Dylan convinced her that I was the enemy. My thumb hovered over her contact. I wanted to call. I wanted to hear her voice, even if it was just to tell me to leave her alone. At least then, I would know she was okay. But I couldn't. I had promised myself after the 20th unanswered call that I wouldn't beg anymore. Instead, I opened my photo gallery and found the album I had created but rarely looked at. Isabel, The Early Years. There she was at 3, covered in finger paint in the kitchen of our old apartment in Somerville, back when I was a junior analyst working 70-hour weeks and coming home to give her a bath and read her 3 stories before bed. There she was at 7, the summer I taught her to swim at the community pool because swim lessons cost $80, and I was still paying down student loans. There she was at 12, the year her father left us for his pharmaceutical sales representative, and it was just the 2 of us against the world. I had worked so hard. Every promotion, every client won, every dollar earned was for her, for us. So she would never feel the poverty I felt growing up. So she would have opportunities I never had. So she could be anything she wanted without the weight of financial anxiety crushing her dreams. And somewhere along the way, while I was building that empire, I lost her. The clock on the mantel chimed 11. Christmas Eve was almost over. In most homes across Boston, families were together. Children were asleep, dreaming of presents. Parents were assembling toys and filling stockings. But here I sat, alone with my designer furniture and my million-dollar views, crying over a cruel text message from a man I had never liked. I had seen through Dylan Morrison the first time Isabel brought him home 4 years ago. She was glowing, practically vibrating with excitement as she introduced us. "Mom, this is Dylan. He's changing the world with blockchain technology." He had given me a firm handshake and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mrs. Hartwell, Isabel talks about you constantly, the legendary CEO who built her company from scratch." Legendary. He made it sound like I was some historical figure, not a woman who had simply refused to let circumstances define her limits. I had sized him up in under 2 minutes. 30 years old, wearing expensive clothes that screamed trying too hard, talking about disruption and revolution while his eyes constantly scanned the room looking for someone more important to impress. He reminded me of 100 mediocre men I had encountered in my career, the ones who mistook confidence for competence and volume for vision. But Isabel loved him. She loved his energy, his ambition, his promises of a future where they would build something magnificent together. Who was I to tell her that I saw red flags waving like storm warnings? She was 28, an adult, a talented architect making her own money and her own choices. So I smiled. I welcomed him. I attended their wedding at that overpriced loft in Cambridge with the exposed brick and the craft cocktails. I wrote them a check for $50,000 as a wedding gift, even though something in my gut told me I was funding a mistake. For 3 years, I played the supportive mother-in-law. I hosted holiday dinners. I sent birthday gifts. I listened to Dylan's endless pitches for investments I would never make because my financial analysis training screamed warnings that Isabel was too in love to hear. And I watched, helpless, as my daughter slowly disappeared into his shadow. Then came the dinner. Isabel's 31st birthday at the Capitol Grill. I had reserved the private room and invited 8 people, her closest friends, and Dylan's business partner. The meal cost me $850, but I didn't care. I just wanted to see my daughter happy. Dylan spent the entire appetizer course talking about his latest investment opportunity. Bitcoin derivatives, he called it. Revolutionary, game-changing. He was so animated, so confident, explaining how he was going to turn $100,000 into $1 million in 6 months. "Vivian," he said, using my first name like we were colleagues instead of family. "You should get in on this. I know you're more traditional in your investment strategy, but this is the future." I had analyzed cryptocurrency markets for a client the previous year. I knew enough to recognize that what Dylan was describing wasn't an investment, it was gambling. Worse, it had all the hallmarks of a pyramid scheme dressed up in blockchain jargon. "Dylan," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice neutral, "the mathematics don't support those returns. Have you had an independent financial analyst review this?" His face flushed. "I don't need someone to tell me what I already know. This is about vision, not spreadsheets." "Investment decisions should always involve spreadsheets," I replied, "especially when you're talking about putting $100,000 at risk. Where is that capital coming from?" The table went silent. Dylan's jaw clenched. And Isabel, my beautiful daughter, looked at me with an expression I will never forget. Hurt, embarrassment, anger. "Mom, why do you always do this?" Her voice was quiet but sharp. "Why do you always have to make me feel stupid? Why do you always have to prove you're smarter than everyone else?" I felt like she had stabbed me. "Isabel, I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. I'm trying to prevent a financial mistake that could cost you your savings." Dylan put his hand on her shoulder. Protective, possessive. "It's okay, baby. Your mother doesn't understand modern entrepreneurship. She built her success in a different era. This is beyond her experience." He stood up, helping Isabel to her feet. "We're leaving. Thank you for dinner, Vivian, but we don't need your approval for our financial decisions." They walked out. Isabel didn't look back. The remaining guests sat in uncomfortable silence while I signed the credit card receipt with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. Happy birthday, sweetheart. That was 18 months ago. In the weeks that followed, Isabel stopped answering my calls. My text messages went from read to unread to blocked. I sent letters to their apartment, Carefully worded apologies mixed with explanations, but they came back unopened. I showed up at her architecture firm once, only to have the receptionist tell me that Ms. Morrison had requested I not be allowed upstairs. My best friend Helena, a clinical psychologist who had known me for 20 years, tried to mediate. She took Isabel to lunch and came back with devastating news. Vivienne, she believes you were trying to control her life. Dylan has convinced her that your criticism was about power, not protection. She thinks you've never approved of anything she's done. I had spent sleepless nights replaying every conversation, every interaction, trying to find where I had gone wrong. Yes, I had high standards. Yes, I had pushed her to excel. But I had also been there for every school play, every swim meet, every college application essay. I had worked myself to exhaustion so she would never know what it felt like to wear secondhand clothes or worry about whether we could afford groceries. I had loved her with every fiber of my being. But love, I learned, isn't always enough. Not when someone else is whispering poison in the ear of someone you love. Now, sitting on Christmas Eve with Dylan's cruel message burning in my mind, I made a decision. I walked to my home office, opened my laptop, and created a new document. Things I need Isabel to know. I started typing. I need you to know that the criticism about Dylan's investment wasn't about controlling you. It was about the fact that I've seen hundreds of financial scams in my career, and what he described had every warning sign. I need you to know that when you were 12 and your father left, you asked me if it was because you weren't good enough, and it broke something in me that I've never fully repaired. I need you to know that every hour I worked, every client I won, every dollar I earned was because I wanted you to have choices I never had. I need you to know that I'm sorry for being too hard, too critical, too focused on success and not enough on simply being present. I need you to know that 18 months without you has been the longest punishment of my life. I wrote for 2 hours, pouring out everything I had held back, every regret and every truth. When I finished, I saved the document but didn't send it. What was the point? Dylan would intercept it like he intercepted everything else. I closed my laptop and walked upstairs to my bedroom. The house felt enormous and empty. I had bought it 5 years ago, after selling my consulting firm for $8.4 million. It was my reward for 3 decades of relentless work. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, original crown molding, a garden that required a full-time landscaper. I had imagined Isabel visiting with her future children, filling these rooms with noise and life. Instead, I lived here alone, surrounded by expensive silence. I changed into my nightgown and climbed into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I kept thinking about that message. Stop bothering her. As if my love was harassment, as if wanting to speak to my own daughter was an imposition. The cruelty of it ate at me. At 3 a.m, I got up and took a sleeping pill. It was the first time in years I had needed chemical help to shut my brain down. I couldn't stop wondering what lies Dylan had told Isabel to make her hate me this much. I couldn't stop imagining what her life was like now, whether she was happy, whether she ever thought about me. The sleeping pill finally dragged me under around 4. I dreamed of Isabel at 5 years old, holding my hand as we walked through the Boston Common, feeding ducks at the pond. In the dream, she looked up at me and said, "Mommy, will you always be here?" And I said, "Always, baby girl, always." I woke up 3 hours later to my phone ringing, Isabel's name on the screen. My heart exploded with hope, even as my brain warned me not to trust it. I grabbed the phone, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Then I remembered. Stop bothering her. I remembered 18 months of silence. I remembered the returned letters, the blocked numbers, the receptionist telling me I wasn't welcome. I remembered crying on Christmas Eve while my daughter celebrated without me. My thumb moved to the red decline button. I pressed it. The ringing stopped. A moment later, it started again, Isabel calling back. I declined it again, and again when she called a third time. By the sixth call, I turned off the ringer and set the phone face down on my nightstand. I could see the screen lighting up again and again as she kept trying. 7, 8, 9. Each rejected call felt like a small, bitter victory. You want silence? I'll give you silence. You want to cut me out of your life? Fine. But you don't get to control when we talk. You don't get to decide that 18 months of punishment is enough and I should just forgive and forget because you suddenly need something from me. The calls kept coming. I counted them. 12, 15, 20. There was something satisfying about watching my phone light up and doing nothing. For 18 months, I had been the one calling, the one begging, the one desperate for connection. Now the tables were turned, and I discovered a cold part of myself I didn't know existed. A part that could watch my daughter's name appear on my screen and feel nothing but bitter satisfaction at denying her. 35, 40, 45. The calls finally stopped at 47. 47 times my daughter had tried to reach me, and 47 times I had let it ring. When the calls finally stopped, I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand. Part of me felt sick. Part of me felt powerful. And a very small part of me whispered that I had just made a terrible mistake. I forced myself to get up and go through the motions of a Sunday morning. Shower, coffee, the Boston Globe delivered to my doorstep, still wrapped in plastic. I carried it to my kitchen and spread it across the marble island, but I couldn't focus on the words. My eyes kept drifting to my phone, silent now, sitting next to my coffee cup like an accusation. At 9:30, I finally picked it up and checked the voicemail. One message. My hand was shaking as I pressed play. "Mom, please." Isabel's voice was ragged, desperate in a way I had never heard before. "Dylan's in the hospital. He had an accident. I don't know what to do. Please, I need you. Please answer." There was a pause, and then a sound that broke something in my chest. A sob. "Mom, please. I'm so scared." I deleted the message before it finished playing. My finger moved on instinct, on anger, on 18 months of accumulated hurt that demanded satisfaction. I set the phone down and picked up my coffee cup, but my hands were shaking so hard that coffee sloshed over the rim. Dylan was in the hospital, some kind of accident, and Isabel needed me. The old Vivian, the mother I used to be, would have called back immediately, would have gotten in the car and driven to whatever hospital he was in, would have pushed aside every hurt and every slight because my daughter needed me. But I wasn't that Vivian anymore. 18 months of rejection had changed me. Dylan's message on Christmas Eve had changed me. I had cried myself to sleep holding a photograph of my 5-year-old daughter while the adult version of her wanted nothing to do with me. Until now. Until she needed something. I walked to my living room and stood by the window, looking out at Mount Vernon Street. It was a beautiful December morning, cold and clear. My neighbors were putting out their trash bins. A young couple walked past with a golden retriever. Normal people living normal lives, probably talking to their children without drama or manipulation or 18-month gaps. My phone buzzed. A text message this time. From Isabel. "Mom, I know you're angry. I understand. But please, he's in a coma. I need you." A coma. The words registered, but didn't move me the way they should have. I thought about Dylan's face across that dinner table, the contempt in his eyes when he said I didn't understand modern entrepreneurship. I thought about his message on Christmas Eve, the casual cruelty of telling me to stop bothering my own daughter. And I thought about something else. Something that had been nagging at me since the calls started. Why wasn't Dylan's family helping Isabel? He had a mother in Connecticut, a brother in New York. Why was she calling me after 18 months of silence? What did she need that they couldn't provide? The answer came to me with cold clarity. Money. She needed money. Dylan was in the hospital, and whatever accident had put him there probably came with medical bills, or legal bills, or some other kind of financial crisis. And Isabel knew that her mother, the woman she had cut out of her life, had $8.4 million in assets. I sat down on my couch, that same couch where I had cried on Christmas Eve, and I felt something harden in my chest. A wall going up, brick by brick, protecting what was left of my heart. Helena called at noon. "Vivian, have you talked to Isabel? She called me at 7 this morning, hysterical. Dylan's in the hospital." "I know," I said. My voice sounded flat, emotionless. "You know? Did she reach you?" "She tried. 47 times." There was a long silence on the other end. Helena knew me well enough to hear what I wasn't saying. "Oh, Vivian, tell me you called her back." "Why would I do that?" I stood up and walked to my kitchen, needing something to do with my hands. For 18 months, she's made it very clear that she doesn't want me in her life. Her husband sent me a message on Christmas Eve telling me to stop bothering her. And now, suddenly, when there's a crisis, I'm supposed to drop everything and come running? She's your daughter. She was my daughter 18 months ago, too. Where was she when I needed her? My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated myself for it. I didn't want to cry anymore. I was done crying. Helena's voice softened. "What happened 18 months ago wasn't entirely her fault, and you know it. Dylan has been manipulating her systematically. I've seen the pattern before in my practice. He isolated her, turned her against anyone who might challenge his control. That includes you, especially you, because you saw through him from day one. So she's just a victim with no agency, no responsibility for her own choices?" I pulled open my refrigerator and stared at the contents without seeing them. "She's 32 years old, Helena. She chose to believe his version of events. She chose to block my number. She chose to return my letters unopened. Those were her choices. Made under duress and manipulation. We're all under duress. Life is duress. I was under duress when her father left, and I had to build a career from nothing while raising a 12-year-old alone. I didn't get the luxury of blaming someone else for my choices." I closed the refrigerator and pressed my forehead against the cool stainless steel. She hurt me, Helena, deliberately and repeatedly. And now she wants me to forget all of that because she needs something. What if it's not about money? What if she just needs her mother? Then she should have needed her mother on Christmas Eve, or Thanksgiving, or her birthday, or any of the 365 days before Dylan ended up in the hospital. Helena sighed. "I'm going to say something you won't want to hear. You're being cruel, Vivian. I understand why. God knows you've earned the right to be angry. But this isn't you. The woman I've known for 20 years doesn't punish her daughter for being manipulated by a controlling man. Maybe that woman was a fool." I pushed away from the refrigerator and walked back to my living room. Maybe that woman let people walk all over her because she was too afraid of being alone to demand better treatment. Maybe that woman is tired of being the one who always forgives, always understands, always makes excuses for other people's terrible behavior. Or maybe that woman is just hurt and scared and making decisions she'll regret. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because part of me knew she was right. I ended the call and sat down at my desk, opening my laptop. I needed to do something, anything, to stop thinking about Isabel's desperate voicemail and the 47 rejected calls. I pulled up my financial management software and reviewed my portfolio. $8.4 million in assets, carefully diversified across stocks, bonds, and real estate. I had 3 rental properties in Cambridge that generated $60,000 a year in passive income. I had a retirement account that would sustain my current lifestyle until I was 120. I had achieved every financial goal I had ever set for myself, and I was completely alone. The thought arrived unbidden, unwanted. I pushed it away and focused on the numbers. Numbers made sense. Numbers didn't lie or manipulate or abandon you. Numbers were clean and predictable and safe. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Isabel. "Please, Mom, I'm begging you. I'll explain everything. Just please call me back." I stared at the message for a long time. My finger hovered over the reply button. I started typing half a dozen responses and deleted them all. Finally, I turned off my phone completely and put it in my desk drawer. The rest of Sunday passed in a strange fog. I tried to read but couldn't focus. I tried to watch television, but nothing held my attention. I kept thinking about Isabel at 5, at 12, at 16, at 25. I kept thinking about all the versions of my daughter that existed in my memory, none of whom would have let me suffer for 18 months without contact. But those versions were gone. The woman who called me 47 times this morning was someone else. Someone shaped by Dylan's manipulation and her own choices. Someone who had decided her mother's concerns were control and her mother's love was suffocating. I made myself dinner, a simple pasta that I barely tasted. I poured a glass of wine and carried it to my living room, curling up on the couch with the cashmere throw. Outside my window, Boston was settling into evening. Lights were coming on in neighboring brownstones. Families were having dinner together, probably arguing about normal things like homework and screen time. I thought about turning my phone back on, just to check if there were more messages, just to know what was happening with Dylan, how bad his condition was, whether Isabel was okay. But I didn't. Because turning on the phone meant making a choice, and I wasn't ready to choose. I wasn't ready to be the mother who forgave everything and came running. But I also wasn't sure I could be the mother who let her daughter suffer alone, no matter how much that daughter had hurt her. So I sat in the gathering darkness, drinking wine I didn't taste, and wondered who I was anymore. The woman who built an empire from nothing? The woman who survived betrayal and came back stronger? The woman who loved her daughter more than anything in the world? Or the woman who could count 47 rejected calls and feel satisfaction instead of shame? I fell asleep on the couch around 10, still holding my wine glass. I dreamed again of Isabel, but this time she was older, maybe 16. We were fighting about something. I couldn't remember what, and in the dream, she screamed at me, "You care more about being right than about being my mother." I woke up at 2 in the morning with a stiff neck and the taste of stale wine in my mouth. The house was cold and dark. I made my way upstairs to my bedroom, climbed under the covers, and lay there staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow was Monday. I had a standing lunch with Helena at noon. I had a hair appointment at 3. Life would continue, with or without my daughter in it. The sun would rise and set. The world would keep turning. And I would survive, because surviving was what I did best. But as I finally drifted back to sleep, one thought kept circling in my mind. 47 calls. Isabel had tried 47 times to reach me. That wasn't a casual request for help. That was desperation. That was my daughter, terrified and alone, trying to reach the one person who should always answer. And I had let every single call go to voicemail. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, matching my mood perfectly. I went through my routine mechanically. Coffee, shower, the careful application of makeup that hid the dark circles under my eyes. I dressed in charcoal wool trousers and a cream silk blouse, adding the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me. Looking at myself in the mirror, I saw a successful woman in her prime. No one would guess I had spent half the night lying awake, tormented by guilt and anger in equal measure. I turned my phone back on at 8. The notifications flooded in. 12 more missed calls from Isabel, 6 voicemails, 8 text messages. I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I made myself breakfast, poached eggs on whole grain toast that tasted like cardboard in my mouth. At 9:15, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the security camera, I saw a figure I recognized instantly, even though she looked like a ghost of herself. Isabel stood on my doorstep, her blonde hair unwashed and pulled into a messy ponytail, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt that might have been Dylan's. She had lost weight, maybe 10 pounds, maybe more. The dark circles under her eyes were worse than mine. My first instinct was to throw open the door and pull her into my arms. My second instinct was to pretend I wasn't home. I stood frozen in my hallway, watching her through the camera screen, paralyzed by competing impulses. She rang the bell again. Then she knocked. "Mom, I know you're home. Your car is in the driveway. Please, please, just let me in." I closed my eyes and took 3 deep breaths. Then I opened the door. Isabel looked even worse in person than she had on camera. Her face was pale and drawn, her eyes red and swollen from crying. When she saw me, her face crumpled. "Mom." I stepped back, keeping my voice neutral. "Come in." She practically stumbled through the doorway, and for a moment I thought she was going to collapse. I caught her elbow instinctively, steadying her. She was trembling. "When did you last eat?" The question came out before I could stop it, maternal concern overriding my anger. "I don't know. Yesterday morning, maybe." She looked around my foyer as if seeing it for the first time, even though she had been here dozens of times before the estrangement. "Can we sit down? I need to tell you everything." I led her to my kitchen and pointed to one of the bar stools at the island. She sat heavily while I moved automatically to the refrigerator. I pulled out eggs, cheese, bread. "I'm making you an omelet. When did you last sleep?" "I haven't. Not since Friday night." Her voice was hoarse, raw from crying or screaming or both. "Mom, Dylan took an overdose. Pills. They think it was accidental, but they're not sure. He's been in an induced coma since Saturday morning." My hand stilled on the cutting board where I was slicing cheese. An overdose, accidental or otherwise. "What kind of pills?" "Anxiety medication and sleeping pills and some painkillers from a dental procedure he had last month." She wrapped her arms around herself. "The doctor said if I hadn't found him when I did, he would have died. But his liver is damaged. They don't know how bad yet. They had to put him in a coma to let his body recover." I cracked eggs into a bowl, whisking them with more force than necessary. "Why was he taking all those medications?" Isabel was quiet for so long that I looked up. She was staring at her hands, her face a mask of misery. "He's been stressed. About money. About his business. I didn't know how bad it was until Saturday, after they admitted him. Men came to our apartment, Mom. 2 men in suits who said Dylan owes them $340,000. There it was. The real reason for the 47 phone calls. I poured the eggs into the heated pan, keeping my movements calm and controlled, even though something cold was spreading through my chest. $340,000. For what? An investment that went wrong. Bitcoin derivatives or something like that. I don't really understand it." Her voice broke. "He told me it was going well. He told me we were about to make a huge profit, but it was all lies, Mom. Everything was lies." I plated the omelet and set it in front of her with a fork. "Eat." She picked at it obediently, taking small bites. I poured her a glass of orange juice and watched her drink it. Part of me registered that this was the first time in 18 months I had taken care of my daughter. The first time I had fed her or worried about her sleep or touched her arm to steady her. Another part of me was doing calculations. $340,000. Men in suits. A coma that might be suicide and might be accident. "These men," I said carefully. "Did they threaten you?" Isabel nodded, still eating the omelet like she was starving. "They said Dylan has 48 hours to pay, or they'll come after our assets. Our apartment, our savings, everything." She looked up at me, and in her eyes I saw the 5-year-old who used to climb into my lap when she was scared. "Mom, I don't have that kind of money. We have maybe 60,000 in savings. I don't know what to do." And there it was. The ask. The reason she'd called 47 times and shown up at my door looking like death. She needed $340,000, and she knew exactly who had it. I sat down across from her, folding my hands on the marble countertop. "Let me make sure I understand. Your husband, who told me to stop bothering you on Christmas Eve, who has spent 18 months convincing you that I'm a controlling monster, has gotten himself into debt gambling on exactly the kind of investment I warned him about, and now you need me to bail him out." Isabel flinched. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Isabel? Explain it to me. Because from where I'm sitting, It looks like you cut me out of your life completely, blocked my calls, returned my letters, told the receptionist at your office not to let me visit you, and now you show up because you need something only I can provide. I need you because you're my mother." Her voice rose, cracking with emotion. "I need you because I'm terrified and alone, and I don't know what to do." You were alone on Thanksgiving too, and Christmas, and your birthday. Where was I supposed to be during all of those days? Oh, that's right. I was supposed to accept that you didn't want to talk to me. I stood up and walked to the window, putting distance between us. Dylan made that very clear in his message. Stop bothering her. She doesn't want to talk to you. Accept it. Those were his words, from your phone. I didn't know he sent that. Isabel's voice was small. I didn't give him permission to respond to you. But you gave him access to your phone. You let him speak for you. You let him decide who you talk to and who you don't. I turned to face her. For 18 months, Isabel. Do you have any idea what that was like for me? Wondering if you were okay? Wondering if I had somehow failed you so completely that you couldn't even bear to hear my voice? She was crying now, silent tears running down her pale cheeks. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom. I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong. But please, I need your help. These men said if Dylan doesn't pay, they'll come after me, and I'm pregnant. The world stopped. I heard the words, but they didn't make sense at first. What? I'm pregnant. 3 months. She put her hand on her still flat stomach. I haven't told anyone except Dylan. I was going to wait until the 2nd trimester to announce it. But now everything is falling apart, and I don't know how to protect my baby. I sat back down, my legs suddenly weak. A grandchild. My first grandchild. Growing inside my daughter while she stood on the precipice of financial ruin and possible violence. Does Dylan know about the men? The threats? He can't know anything. He's in a coma, Mom. The doctors say he might wake up in a few days or a few weeks. Or he might not wake up at all if his liver fails. Fresh tears spilled down her face. I thought about just letting him die. Is that terrible? I sat in that hospital room looking at him hooked up to all those machines, and part of me thought it would be easier if he just died and I could start over. The honesty of it shocked me, but I understood it. I had sat in a lawyer's office 18 years ago, signing divorce papers, thinking the same thing about her father. Some relationships damage you so thoroughly that death seems like the cleanest ending. The men who came to your apartment, I said. Did they give you any proof of this debt? Documentation? Contracts? Isabel pulled her phone from her pocket with shaking hands. She scrolled through and showed me photographs. Legal documents, investment agreements, promissory notes. I took the phone and examined them closely. Everything looked legitimate. Dylan had borrowed $340,000 from a private investment group 6 months ago, promising returns based on cryptocurrency gains. The money was gone. The returns never materialized, and now the investors wanted their capital back, plus interest. This is real, I said quietly. These are legitimate creditors, not loan sharks. They can and will pursue legal action to recover their investment. Can they really take our apartment? Our savings? Isabel's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, they can put liens on your property, freeze your bank accounts, garnish wages. They can destroy your credit. And since you're married to Dylan, they can come after your assets too, depending on how things are structured. I handed her phone back. You need a lawyer, a good one. And you need to understand that $340,000 isn't going to make this go away. There will be legal fees, interest, penalties. So what do I do? She looked at me with such desperate hope that it made my chest ache. Mom, please, tell me what to do. This was the moment. The moment where I could choose to be the mother who saves her daughter from disaster, or the mother who lets her face the consequences of her choices and her husband's actions. The old Vivian wouldn't have hesitated. But the old Vivian had been rejected and hurt and told to stop bothering people. Why didn't you call me when you had the miscarriage? The question came out of nowhere, surprising both of us. Isabel's face went white. How do you know about that? Helena told me. 3 months before you cut me off. You lost a baby and you didn't tell me. Why? She was quiet for a long time, staring at the half-eaten omelet. Because I knew you would judge me. You would say I was working too hard or stressing too much or not taking care of myself properly. You would find a way to make it my fault. The words landed like blows. Is that really what you think of me? That I would blame you for a miscarriage? You always found something to criticize, Mom. My apartment wasn't nice enough. My car wasn't practical enough. Dylan wasn't successful enough. Nothing I did was ever quite good enough for the great Vivian Hartwell. Her voice was rising again, years of resentment pouring out. Do you know what it was like growing up as your daughter? Watching you build this empire while I just wanted a mom who would come to my school plays? Trying to make you proud while you were always thinking about the next deal, the next client, the next promotion. I went to your school plays, every single one. My voice was hard. I left work early, rearranged meetings, did whatever I had to do to be there. You were there physically, but mentally, you were always somewhere else. Checking your phone, thinking about work, you never just existed with me. Everything had to be productive, educational, optimized. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. Dylan made me feel like I was enough, just as I was. He didn't need me to be smarter or better or more successful. He just wanted me. He wanted to control you, Isabel. There's a difference between acceptance and manipulation. Maybe, probably. I don't know anymore. She pushed the plate away, the omelet only half finished. All I know is that I'm 32 years old, pregnant, possibly about to lose everything I own, and my husband might die. And I have no one. Dad is in Florida with his new wife and their kids. Dylan's family blamed me for his stress, said I pushed him too hard to be successful. My friends have all drifted away because I stopped returning their calls. You're all I have left, Mom. You're my only hope. I stood up and walked to my office, pulling out my checkbook. My hand was steady as I wrote. $340,000. Made out to Isabel Morrison. I brought it back to the kitchen and set it on the counter between us. Isabel stared at it. Mom, I can't. You can. And you will. Because you're right about one thing. You are all alone. Dylan put you in this position. His choices, his lies, his gambling disguised as investment. You didn't know about any of it. I sat back down, looking at my daughter's tear-streaked face. But we're going to talk about conditions. Anything. I'll do anything. First, you hire a lawyer today. I'll give you the name of the best family law attorney in Boston. She'll start divorce proceedings immediately. Isabel's eyes widened. Mom, Dylan's in a coma. I can't divorce him while he's unconscious. Yes, you can, and you will, because this marriage is over, Isabel. He gambled away your future. He manipulated you into cutting off everyone who might have protected you. He created a financial disaster that could have destroyed you and your unborn child. That's not a marriage worth saving. He made mistakes, but no but. This is non-negotiable. I will pay this debt, but only if you agree to divorce him and get yourself and that baby somewhere safe. I picked up the check and held it. Second condition. You move back home. Here, with me, until the baby is born and you're back on your feet financially. Mom, I have my own apartment. An apartment that creditors might seize. An apartment you shared with a man who lied to you for months, maybe longer. You need to separate your assets from his, establish independent residence, and protect yourself legally. I stood up again, too agitated to sit still. Third condition, you go to therapy. Real therapy, with someone who specializes in emotional manipulation and recovery from controlling relationships. Isabel was shaking her head. This is too much. I just need help with the money. I don't need you to take over my whole life. Then you don't need the check. I held it up. These are my terms, Isabel. All or nothing. I'm not going to throw $340,000 at a problem and watch you make the same mistakes again. If I'm going to help you, I'm going to help you completely. That means protecting you from Dylan, from creditors, and from yourself. She looked at me with something like hatred in her eyes. This is exactly what Dylan said you would do. Control me. Make everything conditional. Use your money to force me to live my life your way. The words stung, but I didn't flinch. Dylan was manipulating you. I'm protecting you. There's a difference. You came to me because you're desperate. I'm offering you a way out, but I'm not going to enable you to go back to a man who almost destroyed you. I set the check down again. You have until 5 o'clock today to decide. Take the check and agree to my conditions, or walk away and figure this out on your own. Those are your options. Isabel stood up so quickly her bar stool almost fell over. I can't believe you're doing this. My husband is in a coma and you're using this as leverage to get what you want. What I want is for my daughter and my grandchild to be safe. What I want is to not spend the next 18 months wondering if you're okay while you refuse to talk to me. What I want is to actually be part of your life, instead of just a bank account you can access in emergencies. My voice cracked, despite my best efforts. You broke my heart, Isabel. You cut me out completely. And now you want me to fix your disaster and go right back to being irrelevant in your life? No, not this time. This time we do this my way or not at all. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I followed her, my heart pounding. At the threshold, she turned back. You know what? Maybe Dylan was right. Maybe you are toxic. Maybe the best thing I ever did was cut you out of my life. Then why are you here? I asked quietly. She didn't answer. She just walked out, leaving the door open behind her. I watched her get into a Honda that looked like it had seen better days, probably needed new tires. She sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, her head bent, shoulders shaking with sobs. I closed the door and leaned against it, my own tears finally coming. The check sat on my kitchen counter, unsigned by anyone except me. $340,000 that might as well have been $340 million for all the good it would do if Isabel's pride wouldn't let her accept my conditions. Helena was right. I was being cruel. But I was also being smart. I had spent 18 months grieving my daughter. I wasn't going to spend the next 18 watching her destroy herself while I bankrolled the destruction. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. Isabel. I answered on the second ring. I'll do it. Her voice was thick with tears. All of it. The lawyer, the divorce, moving home, therapy, all of it. Just please, Mom. Please help me. Come back inside, I said softly. Let's figure this out together. Isabel came back inside 10 minutes later. Her eyes were red and swollen, but there was something different in her expression. Defeat, maybe, or relief. I couldn't tell which, and I wasn't sure she could either. I handed her the check. She took it with trembling hands and stared at it for a long moment. I'll pay you back. Every cent. I don't know how long it will take, but I will. We can discuss that later. Right now, we need to move fast. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I'm calling Margaret Chen. She's the best family law attorney in Boston. She handled my divorce from your father, and she's ruthless when she needs to be. While the phone rang, I watched Isabel fold herself into one of my living room chairs, making herself small. She looked like a child, lost and frightened. Part of me wanted to go to her, hold her, tell her everything would be okay. But another part of me knew that coddling her now would only make things worse. She needed structure, boundaries, the kind of tough love I should have given her months ago before Dylan convinced her I was the enemy. Margaret answered on the third ring. Vivian, it's been a while. I need your help. My daughter needs your help. I explained the situation quickly, efficiently. Dylan's coma, the debt, the pregnancy, the need for immediate legal protection. Margaret listened without interrupting, and I could hear her typing notes. "She needs to file for emergency separation of assets," Margaret said when I finished. "Today, if possible. That will protect her from any further financial liability for his debts. We can file for divorce once we have documentation that he's mentally competent to be served, or we can petition for a guardian ad litem if he remains in a coma. Either way, she needs legal separation from his finances immediately. Can you see her today?" "I can see her in 2 hours. But Vivienne, this is going to be expensive. My retainer alone is $50,000 for a case this complex. Bill me directly, whatever it costs." I looked at Isabel, who was watching me with wide eyes. Just protect her and that baby. After I hung up, I sat down across from my daughter. "You have an appointment at noon. Margaret's office is on State Street. I'll drive you." "I can drive myself." "No, I'm coming with you. We're doing this together." I checked my watch. 11:15. "We have 45 minutes. I need you to tell me everything, and I mean everything. When did Dylan's behavior start to change? When did he start controlling who you talk to? When did the financial problems begin?" Isabel wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't know. It was so gradual, little things at first. He'd get upset if I made plans without telling him. He wanted to know where I was all the time. He said it was because he loved me, because he worried." She paused, thinking. "Maybe 6 months into the marriage? He started getting jealous of my work friends, said they were a bad influence. Then he started monitoring my phone. He said it was for security, because of hackers, but he was really checking my messages." "Did he ever read my messages to you?" "Yes, every single one." She looked down at her hands. "He would show them to me and point out how you were trying to control me. He'd say things like, 'See how she questions every decision you make? That's not love, that's manipulation.' And I believed him, Mom. I believed him because he said it so sweetly, so gently, like he was protecting me." The anger that flared in my chest was white-hot. Dylan had systematically poisoned my daughter against me, using my own words as weapons. Every maternal concern, every protective instinct, every piece of advice I had offered had been twisted into evidence of my toxicity. "The dinner," I said, when I questioned his investment. "What happened after you left?" Isabel's face crumpled. "He was so angry, not at you, or at least not only at you. He was angry at me for not defending him more, for not shutting you down immediately. We fought for 3 hours that night. He said if I really loved him, I would choose him over you. He said your criticism proved that you would never accept him, never accept us. And he gave me an ultimatum. Him or you. And you chose him. I chose what I thought was my future, my marriage, my chance at a normal family." She wiped her eyes. "I thought you would understand eventually. I thought once some time passed, we could reconnect, and everything would be fine. But Dylan kept finding reasons why I shouldn't reach out. Your birthday, my birthday, holidays. There was always a reason to wait. And then waiting became normal." I absorbed this, filing away each detail. "What about the money? When did you realize he had financial problems?" "Saturday, when those men showed up." Her voice shook. "They had documents, contracts I had never seen. Dylan had forged my signature on some of them, made it look like I had co-signed for the loans. I didn't know any of it existed until they showed up demanding payment." Forgery. Another crime to add to the list. "Do you still have those documents? The ones the men showed you?" I took pictures. They're on my phone. "I forward them to me. Right now. And then forward them to yourself at a different email address, one Dylan doesn't have access to. We need copies in multiple places in case he tries to destroy evidence." I stood up and walked to my office, returning with a legal pad. "We're going to make a timeline. Every major decision Dylan made, every time he isolated you from someone, every financial move you know about. Margaret will need this." For the next 30 minutes, we worked together, reconstructing the slow destruction of Isabel's autonomy. It was worse than I had imagined. Dylan had convinced her to quit her job at the prestigious architecture firm where she had worked for 6 years, telling her that his business was taking off and she should focus on supporting his vision. He had moved them from her apartment in Back Bay to his loft in Cambridge, cutting her off from neighbors and friends. He had taken over their finances completely, giving her an allowance from their joint account, while he controlled all the actual money. "I became so small," Isabel whispered as we wrote it all down. "I used to be someone. I had a career, friends, a life, and somehow, without even realizing it was happening, I became just an extension of him." At 11:50, we got in my car and drove to Margaret's office. Isabel was quiet during the drive, staring out the window at the gray December streets. As we pulled into the parking garage, she finally spoke. "Mom, I need to tell you something. About the miscarriage." I put the car in park and turned to face her. "I was 12 weeks along. I started bleeding at work. I called Dylan first, like I always did. He was in Miami at a conference. He said he couldn't leave, that I should just go to the emergency room and he'd call me later." Her voice was hollow, empty. "I went alone. I lost the baby alone. I came home alone. And when Dylan got back 3 days later, he told me it was probably for the best anyway, because we weren't financially ready for a child." I reached across the console and took her hand. She let me, and we sat there in the dim parking garage, holding hands like we used to when she was small. "I should have called you," she said. "I knew I should. But Dylan had convinced me that you would blame me, judge me, make it about my failures. So I grieved alone. And that's when something inside me broke, Mom. That's when I realized I had made a terrible mistake marrying him. But by then, I was so trapped, so isolated. I didn't know how to get out." "You're out now," I said softly. "Or you will be. We're going to make sure of it." We walked into Margaret's building together, and for the first time in 18 months, I felt like I had my daughter back. Broken, yes. Damaged, yes. But back. Margaret's office was everything I remembered. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor, modern furniture in blacks and grays, walls lined with law degrees and awards. She greeted us at the door herself, a striking woman in her early 60s with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. "Isabel," she said, extending her hand. "I'm so sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. Your mother spoke very highly of you when you were younger." Isabel shook her hand, and I saw her trying to pull herself together, to present the competent professional woman she used to be instead of the broken wife she had become. We sat in Margaret's conference room while she reviewed the documents Isabel had forwarded. Her expression grew darker with each page. "This is bad," Margaret said finally. "He forged your signature on at least 3 of these loan documents. That's a felony. The good news is that it means you're not legally liable for those debts. The bad news is that proving forgery takes time, and these creditors will pursue collection against both of you until we can demonstrate fraud." "How long will that take?" Isabel asked. "Weeks, possibly months. We'll need handwriting analysis, depositions, court filings." Margaret made notes on her legal pad. "In the meantime, we file for emergency separation of assets today. I can have the paperwork ready by 4 o'clock. We'll also file a police report for the forgery. That creates a paper trail and gives you legal protection." Isabel paled. "A police report means Dylan could be charged with a crime." "Dylan committed a crime," I said firmly. "Multiple crimes. Forgery, fraud, possibly embezzlement depending on what else we find. You can't protect him from the consequences of his actions." "He's in a coma, Mom. He might die." "Then he'll die a criminal," Margaret said, not unkindly. "Isabel, I understand this is your husband, but my job is to protect you and your assets. Everything else is secondary." We spent the next 2 hours going through every detail of Isabel's marriage. Bank accounts, credit cards, property titles, investment accounts. Margaret took meticulous notes, asking questions that made Isabel flinch with their directness. How much did she earn before Dylan convinced her to quit her job? What did she contribute to the down payment on the loft? Were there any other debts she knew about? By the time we finished, it was nearly 2 o'clock. Margaret promised to have the emergency filing ready by end of business day. Go home, she told Isabel. Pack a bag. Get out of that apartment before those creditors come back. Vivian is right. You need to be somewhere safe. In the car, Isabel was silent for a long time. As I drove toward Cambridge, she finally spoke. I need to go to the hospital first. Before I pack, I need to see him. Every instinct in me screamed to say no. To keep her away from Dylan, even unconscious Dylan, even dying Dylan. But I also knew that she needed closure. She needed to see him one last time before she walked away from their marriage. Okay, I said, but I'm coming with you. Massachusetts General Hospital was massive and impersonal, all fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. We took the elevator to the ICU on the 6th floor. Isabel checked in with the nurses' station, and a young nurse with kind eyes led us to Dylan's room. I had prepared myself for a lot of things, but not for how small he looked in that hospital bed. Dylan had always seemed larger than life, full of aggressive energy and outsized confidence. Now, intubated and sedated, connected to machines that beeped and hummed, he looked like what he was, a 34-year-old man who had made catastrophic choices and nearly died from them. Isabel stood by his bed, staring down at him. I stayed by the door, giving her space but keeping watch. She reached out and touched his hand, then pulled back as if burned. I loved you, she whispered. I really loved you. I changed everything about myself to be what you wanted, and you destroyed me anyway. The machines continued their rhythmic beeping. Dylan's chest rose and fell mechanically, driven by the ventilator. Isabel stood there for 5 minutes, maybe 10. Then she turned to me, her face set in hard lines I had never seen before. I'm done. Let's go. We drove to her loft in Cambridge in silence. When we pulled up to the building, I felt a chill. It was all exposed brick and trendy coffee shops, the kind of neighborhood where young professionals paid $3,000 a month for 600 square feet and called it urban living. Dylan's kind of place, not Isabel's. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor. She unlocked the door and we stepped into chaos. Someone had been there. Recently. Drawers were pulled open, cushions overturned, papers scattered across the floor. Oh my God! Isabel's hand went to her mouth. They came back. They've been searching for something. I pulled out my phone. We're calling the police. No, no police. Please, Mom. She was already moving through the apartment, checking what was missing. My laptop is gone. Dylan's office has been ransacked, but I don't think they took anything else. I followed her to the bedroom. It was the only room that seemed untouched. She pulled a suitcase from the closet and started throwing in clothes mechanically. Underwear, jeans, sweaters. She moved to the bathroom and swept makeup and toiletries into a bag. Isabel, we need to document this. File a report. And tell them what? That my husband's creditors broke in looking for evidence of assets they can seize? That will only make things worse. She zipped the suitcase closed and grabbed a second bag from the closet. This one she filled with framed photographs, a jewelry box, a leather journal, personal items, things that mattered. I watched her pack up her life in 20 minutes, erasing herself from this apartment that had been her home for 4 years. When she was done, we carried her bags to the car. As I closed the trunk, I saw her looking up at the building one last time. I thought I would live here forever, she said quietly. I thought Dylan and I would raise our kids here. I had it all planned out. The nursery would be the second bedroom. We'd put up a swing set in the courtyard. We'd host dinner parties and game nights and build a life. She turned away. I was so stupid. You were in love. That's not the same as stupid. We drove back to Beacon Hill as the winter sun set behind us, turning the sky orange and pink. My house looked warm and inviting as we pulled into the driveway, lights glowing in the windows. I helped Isabel carry her bags upstairs to her old bedroom. I had kept it exactly as it was when she left for college. The same white furniture, the same blue curtains, the same photographs on the walls. She stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. I never thought I'd be back here like this, 32 years old, pregnant, running from my marriage. You're not running, you're escaping, there's a difference. I set her suitcase on the bed. I'll make us dinner. Come down when you're ready. I left her alone and went to my kitchen, where I had spent so many evenings cooking for one. I pulled ingredients from the refrigerator: chicken, vegetables, pasta, comfort food, the kind of meal I used to make when Isabel was young and had a bad day at school. I was chopping onions when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Vivian Hartwell? A man's voice, professional but cold. Who's asking? My name is Robert Chen. I'm calling on behalf of Pinnacle Investment Group. I understand you've been in contact with Isabel Morrison regarding her husband's outstanding debt. My hand tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? Mrs. Morrison provided it when she deposited a check for $340,000 this afternoon, a check signed by you. There was a pause. I'm calling to confirm that this payment is legitimate and that you understand you're paying off another person's gambling debt. It's not gambling. It's investment fraud. And yes, the check is legitimate. I see. Well, Mrs. Hartwell, I want to be very clear. This payment settles the principal owed by Dylan Morrison. However, there is still the matter of interest and fees, an additional $68,000. I felt ice spread through my veins. That wasn't mentioned to my daughter. It's clearly stated in the loan documents Mr. Morrison signed. The debt is $408,000 total. Mrs. Morrison has paid $340,000. The remainder is still owed. And if we don't pay? Then we proceed with legal action to recover our investment. Liens, asset seizure, wage garnishment, standard collection procedures. His voice was pleasant, conversational, as if he were discussing the weather. I'm sure a woman of your means can understand the position we're in. We provided capital in good faith. We expect full repayment. My daughter is divorcing Dylan Morrison. She's separating her assets from his. Your claim is against him, not her. Our claim is against both of them, Mrs. Hartwell. They're married. In Massachusetts, that makes them jointly liable for debts incurred during the marriage. The only way she avoids liability is if she can prove fraud, which takes months in court. We can make her life very difficult in the meantime. I closed my eyes, trying to control my anger. How long do we have? I'm a reasonable man. Let's say 72 hours. That gives you until Thursday at 5 p.m., $68,000, and this matter is closed. He paused. I should mention that we're also aware of Mrs. Morrison's pregnancy. It would be unfortunate if stress from our collection efforts caused complications. I'm sure you agree that the baby's health should be the priority. The threat was barely veiled. I wanted to reach through the phone and strangle him. You'll have your money by Thursday. But after that, if I ever hear from you again, if you so much as send a piece of mail to my daughter, I will bury you in lawsuits so deep you'll never see daylight. Do we understand each other? Perfectly, Mrs. Hartwell. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. He hung up. I stood there holding the phone, shaking with rage. Another $68,000. It never ended. This was how predatory lenders worked. They bled you dry, one payment at a time. Isabel appeared in the kitchen doorway. Who was that? I told her about the call, watching her face crumble with each word. I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about the interest. Of course you didn't. They probably buried it in small print on page 17 of the contract. I turned back to the stove, stirring the pasta sauce with more force than necessary. It's fine. I'll pay it. But Isabel, you need to understand something. This is how Dylan lived. Always one more debt, one more scheme, one more crisis. If you had stayed with him, this would be your life forever. I know. She sat down at the kitchen island in the same spot where she had eaten her omelet that morning. Was that really only this morning? It felt like a lifetime ago. Mom, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I found in Dylan's things when I was packing. She pulled out her phone and showed me photographs. Bank statements from an account I had never seen before. An account in Dylan's name only, with deposits and withdrawals going back 2 years. The current balance was nearly $100,000. He had secret money, I said slowly. He told you they were broke, that they had $60,000 in savings, but he was hiding $100,000 in a private account. There's more. She scrolled to another image. Text messages between Dylan and a woman named Jennifer. Intimate messages. Love messages. Messages from 2 weeks ago, while Dylan was supposedly stressed and taking pills to cope with financial pressure. I read them with growing disgust. Dylan telling this Jennifer that he was going to leave Isabel soon, that he just needed to secure his assets first, that she needed to be patient while he planned his exit strategy. He was going to leave me, Isabel said, her voice hollow. He was going to take the money from the hidden account and leave me holding all the debt. That's why he put everything in my name. That's why he forged my signature on the loans. He was setting me up to take the fall for his fraud while he ran away with another woman. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. The overdose wasn't accidental stress. It was a suicide attempt by a man who had realized his schemes were collapsing, and he was facing serious legal consequences. Dylan had tried to escape through death when his exit strategy fell apart. That son of a bitch, I whispered. That absolute son of a bitch. Isabel started laughing. It was a terrible sound, edged with hysteria. I defended him to you for 18 months. I chose him over you. I let him convince me that you were the toxic one, that you were trying to control me, and the whole time he was planning to destroy me and disappear. I walked around the island and pulled her into my arms. She collapsed against me, sobbing, her whole body shaking. I held her like I used to when she was small, stroking her hair, making soothing sounds. It's over now, I murmured. You're safe. You and the baby are safe. I've got you. We stood there in my kitchen for a long time while the pasta sauce simmered on the stove and the December darkness settled over Boston. My daughter was home. Broken, traumatized, facing legal and financial nightmares, but home. And Dylan, lying in his hospital bed, had already lost. He just didn't know it yet. Thursday morning, I wired the final $68,000 to Pinnacle Investment Group. Margaret had the receipt notarized and filed with the court, along with documentation of every payment I had made on Dylan's behalf. This protects you, she explained over the phone. If he wakes up and tries to claim you had any financial interest in his schemes, we have proof you were simply protecting your daughter. Dylan woke up that afternoon. The hospital called Isabel at 3 p.m. His liver function was improving. He was conscious, asking for her. The doctors wanted to keep him for observation, but he would likely be discharged within a week. Isabel stood in my kitchen holding her phone, staring at it like it might explode. What do I do? Nothing, I said firmly. You do absolutely nothing. Margaret is filing the divorce papers tomorrow. Let her attorney serve him at the hospital. You don't owe him a conversation, an explanation, or a goodbye. He's going to be so angry. Let him be angry. He can be angry from a distance. I took the phone from her hands and set it on the counter. You're done protecting his feelings. You're done making yourself small to accommodate his ego. You're done. She nodded slowly, and I saw something settle in her expression. Resolution. Strength. The daughter I had raised before Dylan convinced her she needed to shrink. Margaret's process server delivered the divorce papers to Dylan's hospital room on Friday morning. He called Isabel 63 times that day. She blocked his number after the 5th call. He tried calling from other numbers, from the hospital phones, from borrowed cell phones. She blocked them all. He sent emails, hundreds of them, begging, threatening, promising to change, accusing her of abandoning him when he needed her most. Margaret had them all forwarded to her office as evidence of harassment. "He's building our case for us," she said with grim satisfaction. "Keep every message. Don't respond to any of them." The text messages to Jennifer came in handy sooner than I expected. Margaret used them in the emergency hearing for separation of assets, demonstrating Dylan's intent to defraud Isabel. The judge granted the separation and ordered a forensic accounting of all Dylan's financial activities during the marriage. When the accountant finished 3 weeks later, we discovered another $200,000 in hidden accounts and fraudulent transactions. Dylan was discharged from the hospital in early January and immediately hired a lawyer. An expensive one, paid for with money from one of his secret accounts. He tried to contest the divorce, claiming Isabel had abandoned him during a medical crisis. Margaret destroyed that argument with the text messages to Jennifer and the evidence of financial fraud. In February, the district attorney filed criminal charges: 3 counts of forgery, 2 counts of fraud, 1 count of embezzlement. Dylan's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. Margaret made sure Isabel wasn't part of it. "He got himself into this," she told us. "He can get himself out." Through it all, Isabel lived in her childhood bedroom in my house. We fell into a rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Coffee together in the mornings, dinners most evenings, conversations that started awkward and gradually became easier. We talked about everything we had avoided for years: her childhood, my divorce, the choices we both made that led to our estrangement. "I blamed you for Dad leaving," she told me one night in March, when her pregnancy was showing and she had started to look healthier, less haunted. "I knew intellectually that it wasn't your fault, that he was the one who cheated. But emotionally, I thought if you had been different, softer, more accommodating, maybe he would have stayed." I blamed myself too, I admitted. I thought if I had paid more attention to the marriage instead of my career, I might have seen the affair coming. Might have fixed it before it broke. But you couldn't have fixed it. He was who he was. Just like Dylan was who he was. Just like you couldn't have saved your marriage by being smaller or quieter or more accommodating. I reached across the table and took her hand. "We both married men who wanted us diminished. The difference is, you got out before you lost yourself completely." She squeezed my hand. "I didn't get out. You pulled me out. If you hadn't given me those conditions, if you had just paid the money and let me go back to him, I would have. I would have convinced myself it was a mistake, that he deserved another chance." "I know. That's why I gave you conditions. Sometimes love means saying no." In April, Isabel went back to work. Not to her old firm, which had filled her position, but to a smaller boutique architecture company in Back Bay that was thrilled to have her talent and experience. She was nervous her first day, afraid she had lost her edge, forgotten how to be the competent professional she used to be. She came home that evening glowing. "I designed a kitchen today, just a simple residential renovation, nothing fancy. But Mom, I forgot how much I love this. I forgot who I was before Dylan." "You're remembering now," I said. "That's what matters." The divorce was finalized in May, 3 weeks before Isabel's due date. Dylan tried one last time to reconcile, showing up at my house at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. I called the police. He was arrested for violating the restraining order Margaret had obtained. That was the last time we saw him. I was in the delivery room when my granddaughter was born on June 8th. Isabel labored for 14 hours, and I held her hand through every contraction, every push, every moment of pain and fear and finally, joy. When the nurse placed that tiny, perfect baby in Isabel's arms, my daughter looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "I want to name her Vivian," she said. "Vivian Helena, after the 2 women who saved me." I couldn't speak. I just nodded and cried and held them both, my daughter and my granddaughter, my family restored. Dylan's criminal trial was scheduled for September, but he took a plea deal in August. 5 years probation, restitution of $400,000 to the investors he had defrauded, and a permanent restraining order keeping him away from Isabel and Vivian. He moved to Seattle, as far from Boston as he could get while staying on the East Coast. Isabel and I had dinner one night in October, just the two of us while Helena watched baby Vivian. We went to a small Italian restaurant in the North End, the kind of place where they know your name and your order. Over pasta and wine, Isabel looked at me with clear eyes. "I've been thinking about the 47 calls, the ones you didn't answer." My stomach tightened. We had never talked about that directly. "Isabel, no, let me finish." She set down her wine glass. For months, I was angry about it. I thought it was cruel, vindictive. But my therapist helped me understand something. You needed those 47 calls to understand how much you were hurting. You needed to feel the power of saying no after 18 months of me saying no to you. She reached across the table. You weren't punishing me. You were protecting yourself. And honestly, Mom, if you had answered on the first call, I don't think I would have fought as hard to change. I would have taken your money, gone back to Dylan, and we would be having this same conversation a year from now or 5 years from now. I did want to punish you, I said honestly, at least partly. I was so angry, so hurt. When I saw your name on my phone, part of me wanted you to feel even a fraction of what I had felt. I deserved it. Not because of Dylan's actions, but because of mine. I chose to cut you out. I chose to believe his version of you instead of remembering who you actually were. I chose my marriage over my mother. She squeezed my hand. Those 47 calls were the consequence of my choices, and they woke me up. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Isabel smiled, and it was the smile I remembered from when she was young, full of mischief and love and possibility. "Besides," she said, "now I have a great story about my badass mother who let my phone ring 47 times because she knew I needed to learn a lesson. Little Vivian is going to love that when she's older." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like years. Your badass mother who paid $408,000 to save you from your own husband. That too, though I'm paying you back. I've already saved $30,000. Keep it. Put it in a college fund for Vivian. Or buy yourself something frivolous. God knows you've earned it. We finished our dinner and walked home through the October streets of Boston, arm in arm. My daughter was back. Not the daughter who had left, but someone stronger, wiser, harder won. We had both changed. We had both broken. And we had both healed. The house on Beacon Hill wasn't empty anymore. It was full of baby toys and laughter and the sound of Isabel singing to Vivian at bedtime. It was full of second chances and hard lessons and love that had survived the worst either of us could do to it. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about Dylan in Seattle. I didn't wish him well, but I didn't wish him harm either. I just wished him gone, erased from our story except as a cautionary tale. And sometimes I thought about those 47 calls, each one a test, each one a choice, each one bringing us closer to this moment where my daughter and granddaughter lived under my roof and we were building something new from the wreckage of what we had lost. Isabel was right. I wasn't punishing her when I let that phone ring. I was teaching both of us that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's just another form of destruction. And now, finally, we were free.